Briarwood wasn't a place people escaped from, it was a place people forgot. The cracked sidewalks curled upward like dead leaves, whispering stories of promises broken and futures lost. To outsiders, it was just another poor, black neighborhood tucked in the shadow of glossier city blocks. But to 15-year-old Aaliyah Monroe, it was home, and like all homes, it held both ghosts and roots. The mornings smelled like mildew and frying grease. Her mother, Tanya, had been up since 5 a.m., preparing for her shift at the upscale hotel downtown. She moved like clockwork, silent, determined, eyes always a little sad, but focused on getting through the day. "Aaliyah, get your brother ready," she said, placing toast with peanut butter on a cracked ceramic plate. "And don't let him forget his inhaler." Aaliyah nodded, pulling on her hoodie as she glanced at the time. "Got it." Her little brother Malik, 7 years old with eyes too big for his tiny frame, shuffled into the kitchen in mismatched socks. He clung to Aaliyah's side like a shadow. He'd been diagnosed with asthma the previous year, and every wheeze made Aaliyah's chest tighten with something she didn't have a name for. Maybe it was fear, maybe responsibility, or both. School was 5 blocks away, past the liquor store with the busted neon sign and the mural painted in memory of someone named Trayvon. They walked in silence until Malik tugged her hand. "Will I ever live somewhere with grass?" Aaliyah didn't answer. Not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know what to say. Grass was for other people. For now, they had concrete and chain-link fences. At school, Aaliyah kept her head low. Jefferson High was more prison than place of learning. Metal detectors at the entrance. Security guards more concerned with intimidation than protection. Teachers tired, their voices flat with resignation. It was a place where brilliance flickered like a dying bulb, brief, sputtering, gone. In third period, Malik's classroom was next to hers. That's why Aaliyah heard the commotion. A loud thud, then crying, then shouting. She bolted out of her seat, ignoring Mr. Hayes' calls. In the hallway, she saw a scene that made her pulse roar in her ears. A white security officer, Mr. Klein, was pinning Malik to the floor. His knee was on the boy's back, and Malik's breath came out in choked gasps. "He was running, suspected of having something," Klein barked. "He's 7, Aaliyah screamed, pushing past the onlookers. She threw herself over Malik, wrapping her arms around him. "He has asthma! Get off him!" Another teacher finally pulled Klein away. Malik's face was red, eyes wild with panic. Someone called the nurse. Aaliyah just held him, her hands trembling. That night, their mother sat motionless as Aaliyah recounted what happened. "They thought he had what? A crayon? Malik's a baby, Mama." Tanya's hands clenched. "We can't fight them, Aaliyah. We just survive. Keep your head down. That's the only way we make it." But Aaliyah's hands were fists. Her throat burned with unspoken words. That night, she sat on the floor with her school notebook and began to write. He was a child with a lunchbox, not a threat. He ran because children run, not because he was dangerous. But to them, his skin made him guilty. She didn't stop writing until dawn. At school, a teacher named Ms. Everett, a rare soul who hadn't yet lost her fire, noticed the shift. She read Aaliyah's words during lunch break, silent the whole time. "This," she said finally, "this is power. Do you want to read it at the student assembly next week?" Aaliyah hesitated. Speaking meant risk. It meant attention. It meant making herself a target. But she thought of Malik's small body under that officer's weight, and she said yes. The gym was packed with students, administrators, and bored faculty. Aaliyah stood behind the mic, knees shaking. Her voice trembled at first, but with each sentence it gained force. "When you look at us, you see threat. You see trouble. But I'm telling you now, we are more. We are not your statistics. We are not your enemies." Silence followed. Then a clap. Then more. The video of her speech made its way online by evening. In Briarwood, it spread like wildfire. But not everyone clacked. That same week, a message was spray-painted on her locker. "Shut up or you'll end up like him." She didn't know who him was, but she got the message. Still, she didn't stop writing. Aaliyah didn't expect to become anyone. Not a speaker, not a leader, not someone people whispered about in hallways or tagged on social media with fist emojis and words like brave or inspiring. She wanted to graduate, maybe move far away, maybe breathe a little easier. But when the fire starts, you either let it consume you or you learn to control the flames. After the assembly, things changed. Some teachers treated her differently, not all, but a few started nodding at her in the halls, asking about her writing, encouraging her to apply for programs. Miss Everett invited her to a Black student empowerment group that met after school on Thursdays in the old art room. They sat in a circle, shared stories, read poetry. For the first time, Aaliyah didn't feel alone. But with every gain came a consequence. The stares, the whispers, the anonymous messages in her locker grew more aggressive. Someone carved the word liar into her desk. During gym, a white girl accidentally tripped her so hard she slammed into the bleachers. No one said anything, not the coach, not the kids. It was silence, soaked in permission. Her mother, Tanya, noticed the bruises. "You sure you're safe, baby?" Aaliyah hesitated. "Safe enough." "You're not starting trouble, right?" "I'm just telling the truth." Tanya sighed, looking 10 years older. "That truth comes with a cost." Weeks passed. Malik started sleeping with the lights on. He didn't run anymore, even in play. He walked slowly everywhere, as if afraid his own body would betray him. Aaliyah watched him change, watched the joy leak from his laughter like air from a punctured balloon. She started volunteering at a community food pantry after school. Miss Everett had recommended it. It kept her out of the house, gave her purpose. There, she met others, older folks, church ladies. One ex-con turned activist named Jermaine, who talked like a preacher and moved like a soldier. "You got fire, girl," Jermaine said one day, watching her organize shelves. "But fire without focus, that'll burn you down from the inside." She asked him how to focus it. Organize, mobilize, educate, build. That night, she couldn't sleep. She pulled out her notebook again. This time, she didn't write poems. She wrote ideas. Start a mentorship group for Black girls. Organize a school sit-in. Collect stories anonymously and publish them. Demand accountability from school leadership. By morning, the fire had shape. She called it the Rise Circle. The first meeting had 3 people: Aaliyah, her friend Kira, and Malik, who just wanted to draw in the corner. They met at the public library. By the 3rd meeting, they had 12. By the 5th, they had 25 and a shared Google Doc. They talked about everything: police in schools, underfunded classrooms, stereotypes in textbooks, Black hair discrimination, food deserts, even how teachers punished Black students harsher for the same infractions. It wasn't perfect. Some came and went. Others stayed and brought friends. Aaliyah printed flyers, handed them out, left them in coffee shops and on windshields. She posted clips of their conversations online. She shared Malik's story again, this time with her voice steady, her face in frame. She stopped hiding. Then the school district noticed. A letter came. Not directly, but indirectly, sent to her mother, full of veiled concern. "We understand your daughter has been posting content that may present an inaccurate representation of school policy. We recommend she speak to administration before engaging in further activities." Her mother read it twice, then once more. "They're warning us," she said. "They're scared," Aaliyah replied. The Rise Circle held a protest. Peaceful. Organized. 50 students stood silently in front of the school, each holding signs with the names of Black students suspended for minor infractions. Aaliyah's sign read, "Malik Monroe, age 7, assaulted for running." The media came. Local news, blogs, a small podcast, then a bigger one. Aaliyah was invited to speak on a live stream with other young activists. She wore her best hoodie and spoke with a calm, fierce voice. But after the camera cut, she sat in her room and cried. It was too much, too fast, and she was still just a girl from Briarwood. Miss Everett called her after the live stream. "You don't have to be everything at once. I'm scared I'll mess it up." "You will. That's okay. Just don't stop showing up." The Rise Circle got a grant, small, but enough to rent space once a month and provide snacks, school supplies, even bus passes for kids to attend. Aaliyah created a shadow book, an anonymous collection of stories from students around the district who experienced racial discrimination. They released it online. It went viral. Some school board members condemned it. Others applauded. Parents argued at meetings. Teachers whispered in break rooms. One principal called it dangerous propaganda, but no one could ignore it. One day, Malik brought her a drawing. It was of her. She stood tall, surrounded by people. Her fist was raised. Behind her, the sun. "Is that me?" she asked. "Yeah," Malik said. "You look like a superhero." She smiled, then hugged him tight. "No, baby," she whispered. "I look like us." Aaliyah stood at the threshold of something bigger than she'd ever imagined. What started as a whisper between friends in the library had become a movement, breathing on its own. The Rise Circle now met every week in a shared space above an old bookstore. Bare floors, flickering lights, folding chairs. But it was theirs. On the first Friday of the month, they held open voice nights where anyone could come and share a poem, a story, a truth they had carried in silence. The nights buzzed with nervous energy and laughter, tears and healing. Students from other schools began attending. Parents, teachers. Aaliyah had grown into her voice. Not loud or dramatic, just steady, like a lighthouse cutting through fog. People listened, not just because of what she said, but how she held space for others to speak. But as her influence grew, so did the resistance. One day, as she arrived early to set up chairs, she noticed the front window had been smashed. Glass crunched beneath her boots. Spray painted across the brick were the words, "Stay in your place." Police came, took a report, shrugged. The bookstore owner swept up the shards in silence. Aaliyah wanted to scream, but instead she pulled out her phone and posted a picture of the graffiti with the caption, "We're not going anywhere." The post exploded. Local politicians called it deeply troubling. One school board member issued a half-hearted statement, but support flooded in. Donations, letters, offers of help. The Rise Circle got a new window, donated by a Black-owned glass shop across town. They etched the words "Still Rising" into the bottom corner. Later that month, Aaliyah was invited to speak at a state education equity summit. It was her first time flying. Kira helped her pick an outfit, something sharp but comfortable. Miss Everett gave her a carry-on suitcase and told her to breathe. At the summit, she shared the shadow book and the story of Malik. The room was silent, not from disinterest, but reverence. When she finished, people stood. Some wept. Afterward, a woman in a tailored suit approached her. "I'm Dr. Monique Lawson, Executive Director of Future Pathways. I'd love to talk." They met for lunch the next day. Dr. Lawson was composed, direct, warm. She explained that her organization helped fund grassroots movements led by young people of color. "We see you, Aaliyah. What you've built, it's rare, and it's working." Aaliyah didn't know what to say. Dr. Lawson smiled. "Would you be open to a partnership?" When Aaliyah got home, she couldn't sleep. Not because she was afraid, but because her world was opening. She wasn't just reacting to injustice anymore. She was building something lasting, something that could grow beyond her city, beyond her neighborhood. She called Kira at 2 a.m. "They want to help us scale." "Scale what? The circle? The vision?" "Girl," Kira yawned, "you trying to save the whole damn world?" "I'm trying to make it fair enough that Malik doesn't have to survive school." Kira paused. "Then I'm in." Future Pathways offered mentorship, legal support, and a grant to develop a formal mentorship program within Rise Circle. Aaliyah, with the help of Jermaine and Miss Everett, created Roots and Wings, a program pairing high schoolers with college students and professionals. Each mentor-mentee pair met bi-weekly. They covered everything from resume writing to emotional wellness. Malik, now in middle school, became one of the first mentees. His mentor was a young engineering student who taught him coding basics and how to breathe through anxiety. Malik started running again, on the track, not from fear. But the brighter the light, the longer the shadows. A group of parents, mostly white, filed a complaint with the school board. They accused Aaliyah of fostering division, politicizing children, and pushing a radical agenda. At the next board meeting, they shouted. One woman waved the shadow book and screamed that it was race-baiting garbage. Another claimed her son was afraid to speak in class because of people like her. Aaliyah stood calmly at the podium. "I'm not here to silence anyone," she said. "I'm here because for too long we have been silenced. We want equity. We want dignity. That's not radical. That's overdue." The room erupted in noise. Some boos, some cheers. But Aaliyah didn't flinch. That night, her mother wrapped her in a hug that lasted too long. "I see your father in you," she whispered. Aaliyah blinked. "You never talk about him. I didn't want to make you carry the weight of a man who left." "Then why now?" "Because he would have run from this fight. You're not him. You're you. And I'm proud." Aaliyah cried. Not because of the fight, but because in that moment she felt whole. The Rise Circle kept growing. They launched a podcast, held citywide youth forums. They partnered with local employers to create internship pipelines for Black students. One evening, Aaliyah stood before a packed room of high schoolers. "Do not wait to be given permission to lead," she told them. "No one is coming to save us, but we can save each other." Thunderous applause. Outside, under a lavender sky, Malik ran across the parking lot, fast, free, laughing. And for the first time in a long while, Aaliyah didn't feel like she was fighting a losing battle. She felt like she was winning. Together, the city council chambers were silent, save for the distant ticking of an old wall clock and the quiet shuffling of papers. Aaliyah sat at the front row, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her fingers were trembling, but she kept her chin up. She wasn't alone. Behind her, members of the Rise Circle filled the seats, young Black and brown faces, mentors, teachers, parents. Kira squeezed her shoulder from behind. Jermaine gave a small nod of reassurance. They were here to present the Rise expansion proposal, a city-funded plan to establish permanent youth centers across 5 districts, each modeled after what the Circle had built. The aim: mentorship, education access, emotional health resources, and job placement for Black youth. But some on the council were already resistant. Councilman Dwyer, a stiff, pale man with a crisp blue tie, leaned forward. "Miss Brooks," he began, "this all sounds noble. But why such a strong focus on race? Aren't these just programs for everyone?" Aaliyah kept her voice measured. "They're open to all, but they're designed to meet the needs of communities who've been historically underserved. That means we center race, because ignoring it hasn't worked." Another council member, a Black woman named Cynthia Ramos, nodded slowly. "What you're saying makes sense, but you're going to face backlash. Are you prepared?" "I already am," Aaliyah said, "and I'm still standing." The vote didn't happen that night. It was deferred to a later session, with community feedback requested. Aaliyah left the chamber with her jaw set. She knew what community feedback meant. Another round of dog whistles and coded language wrapped in concerns. At home, her inbox overflowed with news alerts. The local paper ran a front-page article titled, "Youth Leader Pushes Race-Centered Agenda." The comment section was a battlefield. One user wrote, "Another woke snowflake trying to divide kids. She should just be grateful." Aaliyah stared at the screen for a long time before closing the laptop. Grateful. That word always struck a nerve. Grateful for what? For surviving systems designed to break her? For climbing out of poverty only to be told she shouldn't look back? She thought of her little brother Micah, of Malik, of herself at 13, too scared to raise her hand in class because her teacher always seemed annoyed by her voice. She wasn't fighting for recognition. She was fighting for release. A week later, a local conservative news network requested an interview. Aaliyah refused. Instead, she recorded a video from her phone, sitting at her kitchen table, framed by plants and the hum of the fridge. "I'm not here to make anyone comfortable," she said. "I'm here to make change. And if that means some of you have to hear things you've ignored for too long, then good, because we're not going back to silence." The video went viral, again, but so did the threats. Emails, voicemails. A letter slipped into the Rise Circle mailbox that read, "You're a danger to our children." She brought the letter to the police. They filed it. Unless there's a direct threat, there's not much we can do. Aaliyah left the station with a knot in her chest and a new resolve in her spine. The Rise Circle began hosting monthly community town halls in school gymnasiums and church basements. It gave parents a chance to speak, to ask questions. They shared data, testimonials, and stories. One evening, a white woman stood up. She looked nervous, holding a notebook to her chest. I used to think equity was just code for favoritism. But then my son was struggling, and one of your mentors took time with him. Helped him see himself differently. I was wrong. Thank you." The room erupted in applause. Aaliyah didn't cry, but her throat tightened. Later that night, she called Dr. Lawson. "We need more mentors. We're growing faster than I expected." Lawson replied without hesitation. "Let's grow with you." But not all the challenges came from outside. Inside Rise Circle, tensions simmered. Some of the founding members worried they were losing control. Jermaine felt the original vision was being diluted. "You're turning this into a machine," he said during a late-night planning meeting. "Where's the soul?" Aaliyah paused. She respected Jermaine. He'd been with her from the beginning. "We're still who we were," she said. "We're just reaching more people now." He shook his head. "Feels like we're reaching for something too big to hold." Aaliyah felt the sting, but she didn't let it stop her. Movements change. So must their leaders. That spring, the city council reconvened. The chamber was overflowing, standing room only. Aaliyah stepped up to the podium, flanked by a dozen Rise Circle youth in matching, still-rising shirts. She opened with Malik's story. She talked about generational harm, the trauma hidden in GPAs and absences, the way some kids learn to disappear because it's safer than being seen. "But imagine," she said, voice firm, "if we gave them something else to become." Then she stepped back. The council voted. 5-2. Motion passed. Rise Circle would receive city support to open 2 pilot centers. If they succeeded, 3 more would follow. Kira screamed. Jermaine hugged her. Aaliyah just stood still, smiling so wide it hurt. Weeks later, as construction began on the first youth center, a repurposed post office in the south side, Aaliyah found herself on the roof, watching the sun dip below the skyline. She could hear hammering, laughter, music playing through a Bluetooth speaker. She thought of her father, not the man who left, but the father she'd imagined growing up, the one who came to recitals, who knew her favorite cereal, who didn't disappear when things got hard. And she thought, I became the person I needed. A soft wind passed. The city below was glowing, and she was still rising. The days grew longer in the small town of Marlow, and though the wounds of the past refused to fully close, something new stirred beneath the surface. Rebecca's name, once whispered with disdain in the town square, was now spoken with a cautious respect, sometimes even admiration. Her movement, steps forward, had grown into something bigger than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just a support network anymore. It had become a guiding light for the Black youth across neighboring counties. But it came at a cost. Rebecca's voice was hoarse more days than not, her hands constantly scribbling plans and lists, her phone always ringing. And yet, despite the exhaustion, she stood tall, because she knew her work mattered, because she remembered every door that had been slammed in her face, because she carried the names of every young person who had cried in her office. It was on a humid Saturday morning that the letter arrived, typed, formal, and with a seal she didn't recognize. She opened it at the kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee beside her. Her eyes scanned quickly. It was an invitation to speak at the governor's youth leadership summit. They wanted her to deliver the keynote address. For a moment, she simply stared at the paper. Her past flashed in front of her. Teachers who ignored her hand raised. Police who searched her without cause. Employers who asked if her name was real. And now they wanted to hear her voice. She let out a laugh, one that cracked halfway through. Not because it was funny, but because she finally understood what she'd built. The speech was short, honest. She didn't coat her words with diplomacy. She spoke about growing up in a place where children learned early what not to wear, where to walk, and how to survive being invisible. She told them about her mother's tired hands, her brother's arrest, the school that offered no honors classes until she demanded them. The room was silent, not cold, attentive. Even the governor nodded slowly, as if unlearning something in real time. When she ended, she didn't wait for applause. She simply stepped down. She hadn't come for their approval, only to be heard. And when the clapping finally came, it felt like thunder. Not for her, but for every voice that had once been silenced. Back in Marlow, the change was quieter. Not everything transformed overnight, and not everyone clapped. But the local library carried new books now. The school invited her to speak. A city council member called to ask if she'd consider running for office. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. For Rebecca, change was never about spotlight. It was about roots, deep ones that held even when storms came. She walked the streets of her old neighborhood that evening, watching the kids play without looking over their shoulders. For the first time, she felt something close to peace. Not an end, but a new beginning.